Oh my God! Would you dare to love a girl whom the entire village believes does not belong to this world? Ayana, the child carrying the bloodline of the deep sea, has now become a young woman. With every step she takes, the villagers' eyes hold both reverence and distance. But there is one young man, Kojo, who dares to hold that hand. The problem is that love does not only face prejudice, but also the call of the ocean, a call that could take her away at any moment. And when human greed from the outside comes crashing in, seeking to turn Ayana into a tool to seize the treasures of the deep sea, will Kojo have the strength to keep the girl he loves? This is no longer just a love story, but a battle between faith, maternal love, and the darkness within the human heart. Love is not always like a field of flowers stretching endlessly under the sun, but merely a small flame trembling amid the storm. In the little fishing village by the Caribbean shore, the love between Ayana and Kojo is that very flame, fragile yet radiant, frail yet unyielding, so beautiful that it makes people admire it and fear at the same time that it might be extinguished at any moment. Ayana, the girl who carries within her the blood of both human and sea, ever since revealing her powers in the storm, has become a strange symbol in the villagers' eyes. Some kneel, calling her the messenger of the deep. Others whisper in fear, believing she is an omen, capable of bringing disaster at any moment. Those contradictory gazes are like invisible blades cutting into the heart of a young girl who only longs to live a normal life, to be loved like anyone else. And among those countless looks, only Kojo dares to step toward her, not with flowery promises, but with steadfast silence. Kojo is not a wealthy young man, nor does he stand out among the village boys, but in him lies what Ayana needs most, a pair of eyes that see her neither as deity nor monster, but as a real human being. Each evening, when the sunset paints the sea red, they sit side by side on the sandy shore, silently watching the waves crash against the cliffs. They need no words, for their silence itself has become the language of two hearts. But that love is far from easy. To outsiders, Kojo seems to have chosen the most foolish path, standing by the girl whom the entire village both reveres and fears. Childhood friends gradually drift away. Once familiar jokes turn into awkward silences. Even his own family has whispered in the shadows, "Don't be foolish enough to get involved with the daughter of the sea. She does not belong here." Those words are like fierce winds endlessly whipping against the young flame of their love. Kojo hears it all, feels it all, yet he chooses silence. For to him, every explanation is meaningless in the face of the village's wary eyes. The only thing he can do is hold Ayana's hand tightly, right before them. That small yet powerful gesture is his declaration. No matter what anyone says, he is still here. And in that moment, Ayana feels both happiness and a sharp ache in her heart, for she knows his love is a defiance against fate itself. At night, when the whole village has sunk into slumber, Ayana still sits alone on the porch, gazing out at the sea. The sound of the waves is like questions without answers. Can she stay forever with Kojo, or will the call of the ocean one day tear everything apart? The moon's reflection on the water casts a faint golden shimmer on her skin, glistening like fish scales. That difference, no matter how hard she tries to hide it, can never disappear. Kojo, in his small home, fares no easier. He recalls the look in his mother's eyes, heavy with worry. "Son, do not let love become chains that bind you for life." Yet every time he thinks of Ayana, his heart quivers as though the sea itself were roaring within his chest. He cannot step back, cannot turn away, for leaving Ayana would mean denying the very thing that makes him feel truly alive. Days pass, and the village's wariness does not lessen. On the contrary, it grows like an undertow. They both rely on Ayana when storms approach, and tremble whenever she speaks warnings. And they cannot hide their scrutinizing gaze at Kojo, the boy who dares to love the daughter of the sea. Every step he takes beside her carves deeper marks into the eyes of the community. That love, beautiful yet fragile, is like a small boat set adrift in a storm. At any moment it could shatter, yet strangely its fragility makes it shine brighter, stronger. For nothing blazes more brilliantly than a flame struggling to survive in the storm. Ayana feels the pull tearing within her. On one side is Kojo's warm embrace, his sincere smile like dawn upon the sea. On the other is the song echoing from the depths, calling her name every night like a haunting lullaby. Can this love truly resist the fate written since the day she was born? That love story, seemingly just the tale of two young hearts, is in fact the spark that will ignite a chain of events shaking both the fishing village and the vast ocean beyond. And you, my audience, do you believe that a small flame can withstand the tempests waiting out there? All right then, dear viewers, stay with us as the next chapter sweeps you into a world where love, greed, and the mysterious call of the ocean clash fiercely. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment to let me know where you are watching from and what time it is right now. There is nothing more painful than when the very place called home becomes the soil of division. After the night of the fierce storm, when Ayana spread her slender yet powerful arms to stop the massive waves, the entire village was spared from devastation. People, still trembling with tears mingling with rain, looked at the young girl as though witnessing a miracle. But as the first light of dawn rose, astonishment turned into whispers, gratitude entwined with fear, and from that moment, an invisible crack began to spread through the heart of the community. Half of the villagers bowed, praying to Ayana as if she were a deity. They placed flowers, fresh fish before Wame's porch, whispering for her to continue protecting them. They called her the messenger of the sea, the light of the waves. In their eyes, Ayana's very presence was a talisman, the reason why their tattered homes had not been swallowed. They knelt, begging her to sing more songs to calm the waves, believing that her voice would keep their ships safe upon the vast ocean. But the other half felt differently. Darkened faces, eyes heavy with dread. They murmured in the shadows, "If the girl can summon the waves, who can be certain that one day she won't grow angry and drown us all?" Such whispers spread like weeds after rain, rooting faster than any seed of faith. To them, Ayana was not a blessing but a curse, not a messenger but an omen. And in their furtive glances, survival in the storm was not thanks to her protection, but proof that she wielded control over calamities they could never withstand. The one who fanned this fear most strongly was an elder of the village. He, long harboring resentment toward Wame, the man still respected despite his frailty, saw in Ayana an excuse to undermine him and stir unease. In gatherings, his voice tightened as he slipped questions into people's minds. Who can guarantee the girl won't turn tomorrow? Who can be sure she won't turn this village into a grave beneath the sea? Such words, sharp as blades, quietly pierced into hearts, until every gaze cast upon Ayana grew more distant, more suspicious. Ayana heard it all. Though no one dared speak to her directly, she could read it in the hurried glances, the forced smiles. She understood. She felt keenly that she still stood beyond the boundary. Even after saving them from death, she remained only different. That difference was not erased. Rather, it carved itself deeper each time the wind shifted or the waves grew fierce. At night, she sat by the window, staring out at the sea, wondering, why did the very hands that once trembled in prayer for her to save them now tremble in fear at her presence? Kojo, as always, remained by her side, quietly laying his warm hand upon her shoulder. But he could not banish entirely the darkness spreading within her. Their love was only like a thin blanket, enough to ward off the cold nights, but not enough to shield against the storms beyond. Ayana knew Kojo could stand against his friends, endure the villagers' cold stares, but could he resist the prejudice rooted in generations? Meanwhile, Wame, the devoted foster father, bore an even heavier burden. He knew the slanders well, knew the cruelty of the human heart when faced with what it could not explain. Looking at his daughter, his heart ached. Love urged him to shield Ayana, yet reason told him he could not protect her forever. He had once lost his wife. Now he feared losing the daughter the sea had entrusted to him. In the days following the storm, the once peaceful village seemed split in two. One half brought offerings to her doorstep, hoping for her favor. The other half avoided her, whispering that disaster would strike if she stayed. The children who once played with Ayana were called home early by their parents. The women who once invited her to taste their fish stew now avoided her, turning their faces away. Even those who had been saved by her in the storm grew uneasy, recalling the golden light that had enveloped her amidst the raging waves. They no longer knew whether to give thanks or to shudder. Day by day, Ayana felt her heart grow heavier. She did not wish to be worshipped, nor did she want to be branded a curse. She only wanted to be accepted as part of the village, as a true human being. Yet that simple desire had become the most unattainable of all. One night, as the wind howled through the bamboo walls, Ayana sat alone, questions churning within her. She remembered the vision of her mermaid mother in her dreams' eyes, gentle yet sorrowful. She wondered if her mother had always known that her path would never be a peaceful one, that she would grow between love and fear, between gratitude and suspicion. A sudden gust tore through, scattering the bamboo screens at the door, as if to remind her that the small flame of her love with Kojo was but a flicker within a far greater storm, the storm of the human heart. And Ayana knew this was only the beginning. Would she ever find a place within a village fracturing because of her very existence? Or would she forever remain one caught at the boundary belonging neither wholly to the land nor fully to the sea? The secret had not yet settled when new turmoil arose, and this time not from the sea, but from the hearts of men. Rumors of the half-human, half-mermaid girl spread faster than the wind, crossing beyond the red sands, carried past every sail that set out to sea, woven into drunken tales at harbor taverns, where fishermen shared stories too strange to believe. In just a few weeks, the stories of Ayana had grown into legends embellished further. A girl who could summon fish into nets with just a glance, who could sing storms into silence, who could open a hidden path to the ocean's floor where ancient treasures lay buried. And like every legend ever told, it drew greed in its wake. Merchants from distant seas, men long accustomed to hunting for jewels, spices, and gold, now heard of Ayana as though hearing the call of fortune itself. They set sail, eyes gleaming with undisguised hunger. Among them, one man stood out above all, Calderon, a wealthy, cunning figure, his name carrying weight like a heavy anchor. He was no fool for superstition, yet he believed in the ancestral prophecy. The treasure of the deep shall only open with the guidance of the child born between sea and man. And when he heard of Ayana, he became certain that destiny had revealed his path. Calderon landed with his retinue, draped in fine garments, fingers glittering with gold rings, his smile forged to charm. He entered the village with the confidence of one who carried a material world the fishermen had never known. Before their eyes, he laid out gleaming silver and gold, crates of food, promises of great ships, thick nets, even vessels strong enough to withstand tempests. In exchange, he asked only one thing, that Ayana collaborate with him, becoming the guide of the sea. In that moment, the already fractured village seemed to explode. Half the villagers stared at the piles of treasure with eyes lit bright. They thought of the lean fishing seasons that would no longer haunt them, of children with full bellies and warm clothes, of tattered roofs replaced with sturdy timber and red clay tiles. Those promises were sweet as honey, softening their hearts. But the other half, those who still carried fear deep within, trembled more than ever. To them, giving Ayana to strangers was no different than chaining the ocean itself. They worried, if the sea grew angry, who would bear the cost? Amid the chaos, Ayana stood silent, her deep eyes absorbing it all. She did not need to hear the arguments. The looks alone spoke everything: temptation, suspicion, betrayal smoldering beneath the surface. She understood that for many, the affection they once felt for her was not strong enough to outshine the glitter of gold. And in that instant, she felt herself like merchandise upon a scale, weighed and measured by greed and fear. Wayne stepped forward, frail in body but steely in gaze. He blocked Ayana, his hoarse voice firm as he rejected every promise laid before them. Behind him, Mama Zola quietly clasped Ayana's hand, her eyes forming a soft yet unyielding wall, and Kojo, without many words, stood beside her, his eyes blazing with resolve. The three of them formed a final barrier, fragile but unbreakable, shielding Ayana from the hungry stares of the greedy. Yet, that protection could not erase the undercurrents in the hearts of the villagers. A few, long swayed, began plotting in the shadows. They whispered that keeping Ayana would only bring doom, that handing her over to Calderon would not only bring wealth but free the village from a curse. Those whispers were like sparks, igniting unrest in souls already seated with fear. Ayana felt the change keenly. The village that had once been her home now resembled a battlefield where human hearts were torn in two. As she walked the red sand path, every step echoed with whispers like thorns piercing her chest. From the child once taken in, she had become a burden, weighed and measured. Saving them from the storm was not enough to preserve love. A treasure promised from the deep could erase everything in an instant. At night, Ayana sat by the shore, watching the glow of Calderon's fleet anchored offshore. Lanterns hung high, shining like giant eyes watching her every breath. The crashing waves beat like urgent warnings. The true trial had only just begun. She gently touched the seashell, the last gift from her mermaid mother. A warm, golden light spread through her hand, reminding her power was not meant to serve greed, but to protect life. But would the villagers remember that truth? Calderon was patient. His smile lingered, but beneath it was cold calculation. He knew there was no need to rush. With just a few more seeds of doubt, a few more honeyed promises, the villagers themselves would deliver Ayana into his grasp. And then, the treasure of the deep would no longer be legend. Amid the vast night sea, Ayana closed her eyes. In her mind, the voice of the ocean whispered once more, "Be wary, for the true enemy comes not only from beyond the waves, but from those you call your own kind." There is nothing more terrifying than when danger does not come from the raging waves offshore, but from the silent footsteps within the very village called home. After the day the merchants departed, their ships still lingered offshore like patient predators, lanterns blazing down on the water like hundreds of watchful eyes. In the shadows, greed and fear swelled within the village, flowing beneath the surface like a swift current. And then, the first betrayal appeared. A few villagers, who had long harbored both a hunger for gold and a trembling fear of Ayana's power, secretly sought out the merchant Calderon. By the flickering torchlight, they whispered promises. "We will deliver the girl as long as you keep your word." Calderon smiled, needing no persuasion, for he understood that greed and fear were the shortest path to betrayal. In the days that followed, Ayana knew nothing. She still sat by the porch, listening to the sea's voice in the wind, sensing unease spreading through the village but unable to call it by name. Mama Zola still embraced her, Wame still strained to protect her, Kojo still stood silently by her side. Yet behind the awkward glances, Ayana sensed something cracking faster than ever before. Then the fateful night came. The village lay in slumber. Only the whisper of waves and the howl of wind through the palms remained. In the small hut, Ayana slept, clutching her mother's seashell, its faint golden glow like a dim lamp. But in the darkness outside, danger crept closer. A figure moved quietly, each step heavy upon the sand, hands trembling yet determined. The hut's door creaked open, a rough hand reaching to bind Ayana. At that instant, the seashell flared with sudden brilliance. Golden light erupted like a pillar of fire in the black night, piercing the darkness, striking the intruder. Staggering, he fell back, while Ayana awoke with wide, terrified eyes. The noise roused Wame and Kojo. They rushed in, catching sight of the betrayer's shadow. A brief struggle ensued, but in the chaos, he managed to wrest free and flee into the night, leaving deep, trembling footprints in the sand. The hut blazed with the seashell's radiance, a light that not only exposed the traitor, but revealed a painful truth. Within the village itself, someone had sought to hand Ayana over. By morning, word had spread quickly. Whispers filled the air that someone had struck a deal with Calderon. Fear turned into suspicion, suspicion into deeper division. Ayana sat silently under the weight of every gaze, her heart torn apart. She did not fear the merchants out at sea, nor the storms of the ocean, but most of all, she feared betrayal from the very people who once laughed with her, once shared poor meals with her, once called her by a tender name. Last night, when those hands reached toward her, she realized she was no longer truly safe beneath this very roof. Kojo gripped Ayana's hand tightly, his eyes burning with fire, as if to say he would stand before her against anything. Wame fell silent, his silver head bowed as though carrying a new, invisible burden. Mama Zola wept, her shoulders trembling, for she knew Ayana now faced not only storms from the sea, but also the tempest of human hearts. The next day, the small fishing village was in uproar. People argued fiercely. Some bluntly declared, if we do not give her up, the whole village will be cursed. Others trembled, begging Ayana to continue protecting them, calling her divine. Yet, in all those words, Ayana heard one truth. No one truly saw her as human. To them, she was either deity or disaster. Never, not once, had anyone seen her as just a girl wanting to live, to love, to belong. When night fell again, Ayana clutched the seashell close. Its golden light flickered in her palm, like a beating heart. She remembered the whisper from her dream. When you face betrayal, remember the sea always speaks the truth. Listen to it. The waves echoed back, salty and heavy, like a verdict. Oh my God! Within the place called home, Ayana no longer knew who was friend and who was foe. And when the betrayer reveals himself, will she choose forgiveness? Or will she face him with the very power she herself has not yet dared to touch? Can you guess what will happen next? Relax for a moment, drop a comment with number 1, or say, I'm still here, to keep listening. In the heavy nights that followed the betrayal, when the whispers in the village had yet to subside, Ayana began to sink into strange dreams. They were unlike ordinary dreams, but rather like doors opening between two worlds, where she stood at the boundary of illusion and reality, hearing a call not from the land nor from humankind, but from the very depths of her own blood. Through the thin, misty veil, Ayana saw a figure she had only ever faintly sensed before, her mermaid mother. She appeared amidst shimmering waters, as though woven from 1,000 stars that had fallen to the ocean floor. Her deep eyes bore the color of the sea, neither sorrowful nor reproachful, but filled only with infinite love. And her voice rose not words of explanation, but a lullaby, softly sung. Remember, you are not a half that is missing. You are whole, a gift entrusted by both sea and land. Ayana wept in the dream. Her tears fell, dissolving into the enchanted waters around her, as though the ocean itself carried her pain. All her life, she had grown up amidst love, intertwined with doubt, sheltered yet always seen through different eyes. Now, hearing her mother's words, Ayana's heart was soothed for the first time by a truth. She was not incomplete, not a fracture, but the very wholeness of two worlds. The mermaid gently lifted her daughter's face, soft fingers brushing against skin that glowed with a tender golden hue. Within that radiant light, Ayana saw memories not her own. The day her mother rose to the surface, cradling a newborn child in her arms. The the day blood-stained, the water red as she entrusted the baby to Wame, and the silent vow whispered into the glowing seashell, binding mother and daughter together. Then her mother's voice grew solemn, no longer a lullaby but a warning. One day, the deep will be awakened. Human greed will summon calamity. When that day comes, you must be strong enough to face it. Not only with the power of the waves, but with the choice of your heart. Those words resounded like echoes that shook the very space, making Ayana shiver, filled with both fear and surging resolve. She jolted awake, her clothes damp with cold sweat, though her eyes still shimmered with tears not yet dry. In the small hut, Kojo and Wame still slept soundly, only the seashell's faint light glowing beside her, its golden pulse a steady beat proving the dream was no illusion. Ayana clutched the precious shell, her heart swelling with longing for a mother she had never touched, yet whose love was sacred enough to cross every distance, even death. All through the day, Ayana lived in a different state of mind. Each crash of the waves echoed her mother's warning. Each gust of wind felt like her mother's hand brushing her hair. Though she could not fully understand, Ayana knew this dream was not just comfort but preparation for a greater storm to come. She remembered Calderon's greedy eyes, recalled the villagers who whispered of handing her over. Deep inside, she realized that when human greed intertwined with the sea's secrets, a dangerous door would be forced open. That afternoon, Ayana sat by the shore, watching the sky burn crimson with sunset. Beside her, Kojo quietly dropped pebbles into the sand, while Wame stood behind like a silent, weathered tree. They did not know what Ayana had dreamed, but both could sense the change in her. Her eyes no longer carried only confusion. They shone with a strange light, strong and sorrowful at once. Mama Zola came, carrying an old worn scarf, draping it gently over Ayana's shoulders. She asked no questions, offered no soothing words, only the silent gesture of a mother's care. In that moment, Ayana clearly felt two forms of motherhood intertwined, one from the sea, one from the land. Both were sacred, both granted her strength. And she understood that this bond of love itself was her greatest weapon when disaster struck. Night fell, the sea lay calm, but Ayana's heart did not rest. She sat by the fire, holding the seashell, hearing its beat in rhythm with her own. She knew her mother's words were truth that could not be denied. The day when the deep would be awakened, the day Calderon and the greedy ones longed for was drawing nearer than ever. No longer whispers, no longer vague promises in the dark. Calderon had returned, this time with no attempt to hide his greed. His great ship docked with black flags unfurled, dozens of armed soldiers storming down onto the sand. Beneath the blazing sun, spearheads and blades glinted as though ready to devour the fragile peace of the small village. Calderon strode among them like a sovereign. His smile was gone, his eyes cold, his voice thundering like a decree. Hand over the girl, and you will have peace. The words fell to the ground like stones, striking the hearts of all who heard. The villagers trembled. Half of them lowered their faces, eyes wild with panic. They remembered the stormy nights Ayana had saved them from, but they also remembered her difference, her mystery, which they dared not touch. To them, surrendering Ayana meant preserving their own lives. Yet the other half stood tall, eyes burning with pride and gratitude. They could not forget that it was this girl who had kept their homes standing, who had kept their children safe. The air was taut, like a bowstring drawn to the breaking point, one sound, one spark, and it would snap into violence. Out of the crowd, Wame stepped forward, his silver hair whipping in the wind. He stood firmly before Ayana, his voice deep yet resonant. "The girl is our daughter. No one has the right to take her." Kojo stood beside him, eyes blazing, his hand gripping the wooden staff as if ready to defy the whole world. Mama Zola stood behind, arms wrapped around Ayana, as though her very body could shield her. The shout of Calderon's soldiers split the air. Swords and spears lifted high, boots thudded on the sand in unison. And then the first clash erupted. The villagers, armed only with bamboo poles, sharp stones, and fishing nets, surged forward to resist. Steel struck wood, cries split the once peaceful sky. The salt of the sea mingled with the metallic tang of blood on the wind. Amid the chaos, Ayana was pushed back. She saw her frail foster father fending off a towering soldier, saw Kojo's cheek slashed red by a passing blade. Her heart pounded, not only with fear. In her veins, another call surged, the call of the sea. No longer a gentle whisper, but a pounding drumbeat, urgent, relentless, like thousands of waves striking the cliffs at once. Ayana reeled, her ears ringing with both the shouts of battle and a mysterious song rising from the depths. Her legs trembled, yearning to rush into the fray, but Mama's hand gripped her tight. The seashell in her pocket blazed with fierce light, golden radiance streaming between her fingers. That light made her feel her body was merging with every wave offshore, as though if she only stepped into the water, the sea itself would rise to her defense. And yet, at the same time, a terrible fear seized her. Her mermaid mother had warned her, "There will come a day when the deep is awakened by human greed." If she unleashed that power, would she save her loved ones, or would she become the storm that drowned them all? From a safe distance, Calderon watched. He saw the glow from the seashell, saw Ayana trembling amid the chaos, and a wicked smile spread across his lips. To him, this was not merely conquest, but proof that the legend of the deep-sea treasure was about to come true. The battle raged on in chaos. Some villagers fell, others were wounded. Yet Wame's gaze did not falter. Kojo still stood steadfast by his side, and Mama still held Ayana tight to her chest. They fought not only for survival, but for the belief that love and family could stand against greed. Ayana clenched the seashell in her hand, its light blazing brighter than ever, forcing her enemies to recoil in fear. But instead of releasing the power, she bit her lip, tears filling her eyes. She knew that if she let the sea rise now, the price would be more terrible than all else. In that moment, Ayana realized her choice was no longer simply to stay or to leave. It was this. Would she dare to bear the role of the bridge between two worlds, or let them remain enemies, doomed to destroy each other? Dear viewers, what do you think? When blood has been spilled, when swords and family ties clash, will Ayana continue to restrain her power to preserve life? Or will she let the sea rise, turning this first battle into a great flood from which no one can escape? Before you grow too breathless, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from all over the world. The red sands of the beach burned with flames spreading from the torches Calderon's soldiers had hurled recklessly. Black smoke billowed. The stench of burning wood and the cries of children pierced the roar of violent waves. Fragile bamboo homes went up in fire. Sparks carried by the wind glittered like tiny daggers stabbing into the hearts of all who watched. Amid the chaos, a group of children was trapped at the edge of the village, flames behind them, waves before them, with no path left to escape. Ayana saw it all, her eyes locked onto those terrified young faces, those small arms reaching out in desperation. In that instant, the call of the sea was no longer a vague pounding rhythm, but a command thundering in her very blood. Step forward. Answer. She had no other choice. Ayana ran toward the sea. Her bare feet touched the surf, and at once golden light exploded, blazing like the sun shattering in the heart of the night. Her long black hair whipped through the wind, her eyes glowed like twin stars. Amid screams and the clash of weapons, a song rose not from human lips, but from the very breath of the deep. It was the song passed from mother to daughter, the hymn of mermaids who had guarded the ocean's secret for generations. Its melody rang out, swelling and falling like the tides, sharp as coral breaking, resonant as the sea's distant drums. Every note burst into energy, shaking the air, making sky and water quiver with its rhythm. From the ocean floor, colossal pillars of water surged upward, rising into a wall of waves shielding against the armed ships. The wave towered like a liquid mountain, its shadow engulfing Calderon's men. Hulls groaned and splintered, masts snapped in two, terrified screams filled the air. Merchants fled, some leapt into the sea, others thrashed in despair. A number sank into the depths, vanishing as if the ocean itself had opened its mouth to swallow them whole. None could still believe they faced a girl. They saw instead the living embodiment of myth rising into reality. In that moment, the children were freed. The wall of waves curved around them, releasing them from the prison of fire and water. Villagers clutched their little ones, weeping in joy and fear alike. They had witnessed a miracle, but also faced the truth. Ayana was no longer just the child they had raised. She was a power beyond their grasp. But with every note she sang, Ayana's life force ebbed away. Her skin paled, her hands trembled as she strained to hold the sea's rhythm. The seashell at her chest blazed with unbearable brilliance, her heart racing as though it might burst. She knew the cost ocean's power never came freely. And then, the song faded. The waves folded back, the sea stilled as though it had never raged. But upon the sand, Ayana collapsed, her body shaking. The golden light dissolved, leaving only a frail figure. Sweat and tears mingled with her ragged breath. Kojo rushed forward, gathering her in his arms, trembling as though his own heart were breaking. Wame fell to his knees beside them, his aged hand quivering on her shoulder, eyes reddened with grief. Mama Zola knelt behind, praying in silence. Ayana smiled weakly. In her eyes there was no longer confusion but understanding. She knew this power had saved lives, but also bore a cruel reminder. The sea would always demand its price. One day, the cost would not only be exhaustion, it might be her very soul. The villagers gathered around her in silence. Those who had doubted her, who had whispered of giving her up, now bowed their heads, unable to meet her gaze. They were grateful, but terrified. In their eyes, Ayana was a savior but also a living prophecy, a reminder of a force they could never control. From afar, Calderon had not relented. Though his fleet lay shattered, his men broken, his eyes still burned with obsession. He had seen with his own eyes the power that could break the ocean itself. And for him, today's defeat was not an ending, but the beginning of a darker, deeper ambition. Kojo held Ayana close, his shoulders soaked by rain, by sweat, by tears. He could not tell. He whispered voiceless words, a silent prayer to keep her here. Yet deep down, he knew each time Ayana called upon the sea, she stepped closer to a line from which she could never return. Ayana closed her eyes, and in her mind her mother's voice echoed once more. You are not a half that is lost. You are whole. But at once it shifted, becoming the roar of the tide. The sea will reclaim. Her heart, just saved by maternal love, was torn again by that merciless reminder. The red sands still carried the stench of smoke from the chaotic night. Fragments of shattered boats drifting onto shore as grim evidence of a battle no one wished to remember. Yet within the villagers' hearts, the aftershock raged fiercer than the storming waves. They had witnessed with their own eyes Ayana, the orphan who had grown among them, now standing at the ocean's edge, singing a song that made the very sea bow to her. They had been saved, but they had also faced an undeniable truth. Ayana did not fully belong to them. No silence could stretch further. The next evening, as the sun cast golden light upon the red shore, Ayana stepped forward before the eyes of the entire village. Wame, Kojo, and Mama stood behind her like a silent circle of protection, but this time she needed no shield. Her face was still weary from exhaustion, yet her eyes shone with a resolve never seen before. Her voice rang out low, clear not as a plea, but as a declaration carved into sand and wave. She admitted her true nature, child of sea and child of man, human blood coursing through her heart, but the ocean's call alive in her breath. She was born not to be imprisoned by fear, nor worshipped as some distant deity, but to be the bridge between two worlds long bound by suspicion and strife. The villagers fell silent. Some wept, remembering the times they had been selfish, trembling with doubt, even scheming to hand her over in exchange for fragile safety. They bowed their heads in shame, tears falling not only from regret, but from the realization that the girl before them had grown beyond all prejudice. Yet other eyes still darted away, fear rooted too deeply. They asked themselves silently, a power that protected them today, might it not tomorrow become the very storm that drowned them all? Ayana saw it all, but for the first time she did not turn away. She stood firm, breathing in deeply as if inhaling both salt and earth, both sea breeze and wind. She said she would protect this land, for it was where she had been raised, where her childhood home stood, where arms had cradled her when her mother vanished in the white foam. But she also spoke clearly. She did not belong to anyone, not as an offering to appease the waves, not as a statue placed on an altar to be revered with fearful eyes. She was herself whole, free, and with the responsibility to choose her own path. Her words swept over them like wind cooling hardened hearts, stirring wounds unhealed. Children gazed at her with shining eyes, as if seeing a living legend. The elders trembled, hands clasped in prayer. The young men of the village lifted their heads, seeing for the first time a faith built not on fear, but on courage and truth. Yet in the shadows a few eyes still wavered, lips pressed tightly shut. Division had not vanished, but for the first time, truth was no longer buried. Kojo's hand tightened, pride and worry surging together in his chest. He knew this moment was a turning point. Ayana was no longer the girl hiding within protective arms, but a torch whose flame could guide the way, or burn away every bond. Wayne looked upon her as though seeing his own flesh extended into a new generation. Not a burden he must shield, but a pride that drew tears to his eyes. Mama pressed a hand to her chest, her heart racing, torn between fear of losing and joy at witnessing Ayana walk her own path. The whole village now stood before two choices: to embrace her as part of their community, or to let fear lead them still. There was no more room for ambiguity, and Ayana, though exhausted, chose to tear through the mist of suspicion with her voice. In that moment, she was no longer the abandoned child left upon the shore, but the heir of both worlds, ready to face a greater trial. Will this fearless confession allow Ayana to be seen as she truly longs to be, or only expose more starkly the unbridgeable distance between her and the villagers? Will this choice lead her to freedom or open the way to a greater tragedy ahead? That day, the red sands lay silent, as though the ocean itself was listening. After months torn apart by suspicion and fear, after nights drenched in blood and tears, at last the truth was spoken from Ayana herself. The girl once marked as different, once nearly bartered away like a commodity, now stood tall, letting the sunlight gild every drop of sweat still clinging to her skin. The villagers no longer looked at her with a single gaze. In the hundreds of eyes that met her, there was regret, admiration, lingering fear, but above all, one undeniable truth. Ayana was no longer the orphaned child they had sheltered. She had become the soul of the village. Wame stepped forward, his frail legs carrying the weight of age, his calloused hand resting gently on her shoulder. He had raised her with love in place of fate, had hidden the truth with tender lies, hoping only that she might live as an ordinary girl. But now, there was nothing left to hide, nothing left to hold back. His voice broke, mingling with the sound of the waves. "You are no longer my burden. You are my pride." His eyes blurred with tears, but for the first time, there was no trace of fear in them, only pure, sacred love and an unshakable faith in the daughter he had chosen as his own flesh and blood. Mama Zola came forward, her weathered face trembling. Then suddenly she opened her arms and embraced Ayana. That embrace was no longer that of a woman anxious over gossip, but of a true mother reclaiming the child she had lost long ago. The years of sorrow, the sleepless nights for the baby who never grew, all seemed soothed as she whispered, not with words but with warmth, "You are my gift, my flesh I never lost." In that embrace, Ayana wept like a child, letting pain and joy dissolve together, letting the long, yearned-for touch of motherhood fill her heart. Kojo stood behind, silent, his hands tightening and loosening as though searching for courage to step forward. He did not need many words. He simply placed his hand in Ayana's ap. In that moment, upon the salt-stained sand and under the sea breeze, he made a voiceless vow. "Even if the sea calls, I will stand here, on the shore, waiting for you." It was no reckless promise, no pledge to bind her to land, but a simple wish to be the harbor she could always return to, even if she belonged to two worlds. The villagers slowly gathered around, not with secretive whispers, but with tears streaming down, with hesitant yet genuine nods. Some knelt, not to worship, but to give thanks for being saved, and because they knew now they bore the responsibility to protect her as she had protected them. On that beach, the air was no longer division, but like a wound finally closing, letting in fragile yet radiant light. Yet as dawn stretched out to the distant sea, the light revealed a lurking shadow on the horizon. The skyline was no longer filled only with gulls and white waves. Tiny dark specks grew larger, shaping into unfamiliar ships, sails swollen with wind, carrying smoke and ambition. Peace had barely taken root when a new trial came rushing in, a reminder that human greed never ceases. Calderon may have fallen, but he was not the only one who knew the legend of the Child of the Sea. That night, as Ayana slept, sweat glistening on her brow, she dreamed again of voices rising from the depths. No longer a gentle lullaby, but a chorus mighty, resounding like the ocean's thunder. Shimmering, finned figures encircled her, their eyes glowing like galaxies, calling her name in an ancient tongue. "Nia, child of the tide, the day has come." She awoke with a start, heart racing, her trembling hand reaching for the seashell at her bedside. It glowed once more, a golden light piercing her heart, reminding her she could not escape her fate. Ayana knew her confession before the village was only the first step. The trust sown today could be tested again tomorrow. Kojo's vow, her father's love, Mama's embrace, all were strength to her. Yet beyond the shore, the wide world still cast covetous eyes, and beneath the waves, the sea still whispered to reclaim its own. She knew she would face choices again and again, and each choice would demand a price no one else could pay. Could Ayana protect her love and the fragile faith of the village, when on the horizon strange ships had appeared, and beneath the sea the mermaids' voices still rose, calling her name? Would she keep the freedom she had just claimed, or was this only the beginning of the greatest battle of her life? The sea calmed after days of fury, yet within every heart still echoed the remnants of both fear and hope. Ayana stood upon the red shore behind her, the embrace of family and a love that had never once let go. Before her, the vast ocean calling her name. The trust newly built within the village was as fragile as a seashell easily broken, but the eyes of Wame, Mama Zola, and Kojo affirmed one truth: she was no longer alone. And yet, far offshore, the silhouettes of unfamiliar ships still rose and fell with the waves, like blades poised to pierce the veil of peace so newly mended. And in her dreams, the songs of the mermaids surged relentlessly, like a hymn foretelling a trial greater than any before, where Ayana must answer the ultimate question. Would she choose to become the bridge between two worlds, or be dragged under by the very power coursing through her veins? Ayana's story reminds us, at times, what makes us different is not a burden, but a gift. Only when we dare to face fear and doubt do we discover the true strength to love, to protect, and to heal. And now, I want to hear from you, my dear audience. If you were Ayana, would you choose the land with its familiar love, or the deep sea with its mysterious destiny? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss part 4, where the untold secrets will begin to surface. Who knows? Perhaps it is you who will help shape the next chapter of this legend.